Sí, señores, si les puedo rogar de tomar sus asientos.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. And I have the great honor and pleasure to have today the participation of Mr. Marcelo Ebrard, the Secretary for Foreign Affairs from Mexico. This is a tenure he's held since 2018, and as you all know, Secretary Mr. Ebrard and the former head of government of the Federal District, and now between 2006 and 2012, he was a Secretary for Social Development and the Secretary for Public Security in Mexico City as well. And during a survey that was led by city mayors in 2010, he was considered the best mayor in the world. So this is a position he took after the global network of secure cities from the United Nations between 2012 and 2014. And he has worked closely with President López Obrador and during his administration. And he's had his tenure for the past 4 years, now Secretary for Foreign Affairs. And Mr. Secretary, it is a pleasure to welcome you virtually, but you have such a tight agenda. It's an honor to welcome you here. We will listen to your remarks, and then I will moderate a few questions with our audience here in Mexico City at the HSBC venue, and also with a couple of hundred people following us virtually, like yourself. So, Secretary, you have the floor, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Good day, everyone. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity from the Mexican Council for Mexican Affairs to all the participants at this meeting. I am here at Palacio Nacional. I'm not there because there are meetings I need to attend and accompany the president later on. That's why I'm here in a virtual mode, and I'll make the most of our time and share with you. So, what would be the standpoint of our foreign policies and politics? In the first place, what the administration of Mr. López Obrador is to accelerate the integration, the economic and commercial integration of North America based on our current reality, the geopolitical reality surrounding us, and also the strategies implemented in our country. So this has led to reactivating a set of instruments that were left dormant in the wake of the Summit of North American Leaders and the High-Level Economic Forum and other many initiatives that have entered into a phase of a very little activity. So with that in mind, what we have is a common route with the United States and Canada in view to improve and adequately protect our chains of value, increasing our capabilities and capacities in the midst of a crisis of extreme situations such as the COVID-19 pandemic and now what we are currently experiencing because of inflationary trends and the scarcity of certain materials because of the war of Russia against Ukraine. So we've taken the first steps in the right direction to protect our value chains and to improve our capacity to react to these types of crises, that we will need to assume that these crises will be more frequent than they were ever in the past. So we will have to create a regional scheme that is tied vis-a-vis other regions in the world. I didn't view it in this way necessarily, but the consequence will be that some of the main investments and technological capacities and the supply chains are located to be well pinpointed in the region to protect our value chains and our response capacity. We also have an ongoing negotiation with the European Union. As you know, we have not completed it, not because Mexico does not wish it, but because the European Union and their decision-making processes are much more complex. So I hope soon we'll be able to solve that. And in the negotiations with Europe, the negotiations have already concluded. It became a lot more complex, and it extended itself beyond anything we expected. Obviously, very many watersheds. You know them. I don't need to describe them. But this entails a set of engagements, wide scope engagements for Mexico, not only in regard to trade, investment, but also environmental protection, clean energies, and of course, the topics regarding human rights and our democracy in the long term. So there is affinity of values between Mexico and the European Union. But as I already said that, we are waiting for the conclusion, and hopefully the process, the negotiation process that is very complex, will come to an end. And on the other hand, we're growing the Pacific Alliance. It's an important endeavor. It started out with Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Mexico. And now Singapore is joining it. We would have the first partner from the other side of the Pacific. This consolidates the alliance in a more efficient and active way. And Ecuador is about to join in too. And as you know, because of their location, we have requests from other countries. We will assess them. And it's not only a free trade agreement, but we're getting more and more initiatives involved in regard to different types of other spheres of initiatives. Mexico has a very relevant presence in Central America, and we have a criterion here that has to do with how to regulate in the best way possible the migration phenomenon flows. They will never abate. Everything points out that they will be increasing. The U.S. last year had the lowest growth rate in its history. And I don't know if it was much too low because of the pandemic, but anyway, it reaffirms the demographic trends that we're currently seeing. The census in 2020 showed a growth rate of 0.4. So most certainly in this decade, we will be close to zero in relative to the growth. So how can United States preserve its growth without an organized migration flow and organize it with Mexico? But a constant migration flow and considerable flow, bearing in mind the needs of the economy. Hence, this demographic reality, if we are reasonable, what we would need to do, and in Mexico, in the southeastern part of the country, we're having the same situation, and the hotel and restaurant managers who are a very powerful economic group, that they don't have any workers. They don't find workers. They have serious issues recruiting people. They have thousands of vacancies in Cancun, imagine. So same things happening, same thing with the Tren Maya, the Mayan train, and in the private sector. So there's a great opportunity because of this demographic trend. Mexico is growing 0.2%. Guatemala is growing 2.5%, a larger growth rate, and so on and so forth. So there's an objective need and a labor mobility need that was not that obvious. That was not that obvious, and it was not as satisfying as it is becoming today. Now, let's see if it's feasible, politically speaking, in regard to the United States. However, we need to know clearly that we have the circumstances of a favorable scenario to go from the 20th century model and to migrate to a 21st century model to regulate these phenomena. At the same time, we made an important investment in Honduras and El Salvador. In El Salvador, we have 20,000 people working and with intermediation. And this is working, especially viewing a program entitled Saving Lives, Salvando Vidas, and for wood products and other compatible activities. In Honduras, we already have 40,000 workers, youth consolidating the future, very much like the programs implemented in Germany and other countries in Europe in regard to the traditions of the professional associations, handicrafts, but also how to organize the corporations, the companies at large. So in these countries, we have a considerable amount of people, and in the case of the two countries, we have an important migration flow towards Mexico. So it does have an impact. Talking about El Salvador, in that case, Mexico has repatriated about 8,000 people. Every 3 months, we repatriate people. But if we compare it to the number of people who are already working and now in their trade and will have 40,000, we would be talking about a number of people who are working in their country with the support of Mexico that the ones that we were repatriating. It didn't used to be that way 3 years ago. So this evidence, we're showing it with the U.S. in order to carry out investments, make proportional investments of about $100 million. And the U.S. could invest in these programs, or if it were proportional, if the economies were proportional, we would be talking about $2 billion in investment in regard to these migration flows. So we need to regulate the phenomenon, and because of the reality I just depicted, and as this happened, we are investing in Central America. I hope that the Biden administration accompanies us in a greater scale in regard to this endeavor, together with other initiatives in Central America. So in regard to Latin America at large, we have resumed López Obrador, President López Obrador, made a State of the Address during the anniversary of Mr. Bolivar, and what he said is we're trying to persuade the U.S. to advance towards a different model than the inter-American model that was implemented, more oriented towards the European Union than what we have currently. And this model is quite complex, but it is feasible if we keep the pace in the long term. Let's see now the topic at the Summit of the Americas, see what happens if the Mexican model follows that line with a roadmap that will enable us to fix short-term situations. We do not have any more sanitary urgency. If you see the way we reacted to the pandemic, we became differentiated. The access to vaccines was totally different in time, and the capacity to do it in time and form, and to solve the supply for Latin America. And we think that that would be the first task. Let's see if at the summit, we can do it. It would be like an action plan. It also has to do with the production of medical equipment. We're used to the manufacturing of these equipments in Asia. Mexico has a huge manufacturing platform, and we have Brazil, Argentina, and in every country, in all countries in Latin America will see different realities. But to be more specific, we could not make a ventilator in 2020. Now we're doing that. We had to bring everything from China, import everything from China. We did not make parts. For instance, the ventilator that was designed by CONACYT with the support of the companies. And now we have a manufacturing plant in Chihuahua for the ventilators and other companies that participated, but we needed the participation from 18 countries. And it was not easy to get them to participate, and a lot of delays. Same happened at the National Institute for Nutrition. And we had 13 FEMSA companies that participated, and in record time, they came up with a good design of a ventilator, but they also faced the issues of having access to it. And then we had the vaccines. And I will not extend myself, but this is a national security issue, and I've been invested in that, and we hope to have a greater response to that. So that is the first watershed. We could try out Mr. López Obrador's thesis and the discussion to invite everyone around the table, and we need to resolve some issues. And let's see where it ends. From our own take from 2012, we already took the agreement at the Cartagena summit, and we'll think that it would not be wise nor acceptable to step backwards, to step back, because otherwise it would become impossible. So I hope this will find a good way out. So this is in view to the summit. So how compatible and how well integrated are you with the U.S. and how to have a presence in Latin America, because it was considered not feasible? Well, we think that not only it's compatible, but it's indispensable to have these two goals at the same time, and as shown, and it is feasible to attain that. In regard to other areas in the world, we are increasing our presence in the countries of the Gulf, sovereign nations with a very marginal presence. And the main goal is to invite these countries to participate in Mexico. This current year, we will be undertaking official visits, because they need investment portfolios, and we need to be prepared for that. In regard to these countries, we could have some very important outcomes. We really focused on our relationships with China, with India, and more than a report in regard to our travel. They're growing 8%, at an 8% growth. It's a partner number 9 for Mexico. China, right after the U.S., is one of our main trade partners. India is among the 10 most important trade partners. So we will open a consulate in Bombay, and we will have a liaison with many Indian enterprises. We are now collecting many interesting experiences, their digitalization that they attained in record time, and communications. And so we are really focusing on India. And same for Japan, South Korea. We're about to launch a very complex relationship, but very interesting free trade agreement with Japan. Very interesting. And let's see what happens with the trade agreement with Japan, with great possibilities to grow. But we are currently leading the negotiations. We are getting closer to countries like Australia that has become an important investor in Mexico. So we will be visiting the minister. And at the venue of the headquarters of United Nations, we have a very active presence in regard to the conflict in Ukraine. We have presented many resolutions, agreements at the General Assembly because we are members of the Security Council, and the need to stop the attacks immediately and humanitarian aid and assistance. And that has to do with the main decisions. And I think that the role of Mexico has been very positive, and we have played a leading role. In Mexico has raised its voice and has put forward its proposals to see a way out in this conflict, because the cost for all countries in the world would be expensive because of the lack of grains, because of scarcity of grains. Think about the Middle East. They depend on the grains from Ukraine and part of Africa also. And we don't import grains, but we import fertilizers, and the inflation is already putting a strain on our economy. So this is a very tight landscape, half an hour. Where's Mexico? What are the main initiatives? And thank you again for this generous invitation. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor ministro, por sus explicaciones y también por
Thank you very much for your explanations, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for giving us a tour of the world and also of the specific regions where the foreign policy is headed. We have a few questions here for you. I think we have about 15 minutes time, and we want to ask our virtual participants that if they want to go through Conference Plus, they can make their questions. I have people here a little bit timid, a little bit shy, so I think that you can send me a question and I can ask the minister to answer it. But let me tell you, I will take off from you left off. You say that Mexico is playing a very important role together with other countries in the United Nations in the conflict of Ukraine, trying to find a solution to this terrible, terrible war, which is having great impacts on many countries, and especially many innocent people, where they are having problems with different materials, fertilizer, etc. What is your view, your words towards the Ukrainian crisis? We say that the war should end in 2 months, but we see that all of this continues. The war continues. Global impacts continue. From my point of view, from my own personal point of view, I think is that in foreign affairs, Mexico has joined India, Brazil, South Africa. They have kept themselves a bit outside of the conflict by taking the stance of an abstention with Russia at the forefront, saying that it would be more difficult to follow a diplomatic solution, but more it would be recommended more highly, but that hasn't arrived yet. That hasn't come. What happens then? What happens with you, in Mexico, and the other participants in this stance regarding the Ukrainian conflict? Yes, the strategy that we have followed and what we have proposed has, as a backdrop, Mexico's experience with other countries at other times. We recognize the limits and the hard lines in decisions between and amongst peoples and nations. So, regarding the position of Mexico, we think that it would be a problem and a mistake to take Russia out of the framework uh, that we have followed with other countries and responsibly contain or sanction the aggressions made to human rights. They have to give us information, the norms, standards, towards human rights, regarding human rights. So we have to be very careful and make a very timely decision. We can't do this from one day to the next. We can see that on the side of the realpolitik, real politics, real policies, is there. The only country that has been suspended was Libya, and that was in the era of Gaddafi. And I think that this is important to say. We're talking about the Security Council of the United Nations. We have seen and taken positions also from other countries, Finland, India, and we see that there are mistakes being made where Russia is the target of being excluded from the international organization. The more that we set aside Russia, I think that this is more obvious in the sense that we would be excluding a country and this would make things matter. And of course, we in Central America have great experience regarding El Salvador and Nicaragua. And all of these pathways that take us to double down Russia, taking them out of the international framework will not help because it limits the participation of Russia and other areas. So I think that what is more necessary is to create conditions with a political dialogue. I think that solutions may take more time, but still, these types of decisions don't lead us anywhere that would be healthy. Thank you very much for your response. I think this has been very clear, and I think that Russia has a permanent position in the Security Council. It will be at the core all the time. And the idea of Mexico is to balance out policies, the best policies possible. Are there any questions here in the room for the minister? I see 2 or 3 hands, and I'm sure that we'll have many more hands raised before we finish. Oh, yes, I see another hand over there. I don't know if the other microphone can go to the back of the room. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. Hello, I am Monica Sedelianti. You are the foreign minister of Mexico, and it's well known that you are a probable candidate for the presidency of Mexico. What do you see about Mexico that makes you, that excites you, that make you enthusiastic in the future? If you think in terms of this changing world, and you have the view of the future, and you say, Mexico, if Mexico plays correctly, with the United States and China and the situation concerning Ukraine and Russia and even the emerging economies, where, of course, Mexico is in the group that is in the best position, what really makes you enthusiastic? What do you dream about concerning a global Mexico in the future? We're all going to be in Mexico, and this we have a very young actor amongst us, 23 years, and we have a very fine opportunity of studying the talents and having talented people with us. So I think that what we should all be enthusiastic about is to have an opportunity that we have not seen in many years, an opportunity for Mexico to be on the side of enthusiasm and to do the right thing for the young people. Yes, we have another question. We're going to take this question. Yes, Foreign Minister, you spoke of geopolitical aspects, and you talked about the exclusion of Russia, which is untimely and inconvenient. Do you think that would be a mistake to make Russia leave the G8? Do you think that Russia should again be a part of the G8? Well, the decision is already made, but we are discussing now the situation of G20. As you know, we have a meeting in Indonesia. So there are two positions. One that says, let's not invite them anymore. Or this contradiction of if we take them out of the UN, why don't we also present a proposal to get them out of the G20? What would be the best solution for us? It is a mistake to get them out. We're not going to go anywhere with this. It wouldn't be right. And there is no favorable effect in doing this. This is done with evidence in hand. This is an ideological issue. If you try to weaken a country in order to keep them at bay, this is going to be an enormous punishment. It's going to be harmful. So I don't think that we should be pursuing. Why do we insist then in the UN, in these measures, rather? We should look for other measures. Let's look for other options. If this doesn't work, we should do something else. I think that we are excluding countries from international fora. Well, what we're doing is then setting up limitations of everyone within the international community. We should not bring out and underscore the importance of limits. So we should not limit countries from being part of the international community. If we exclude one, we could easily exclude others, and this would bring us to another system. And that, I think, would not be a very promising idea. So Mexico does not allow for these exclusions. May I add a follow-up question? May I present a follow-up question? Exclusion and suspension. Do you think that suspension is equal to exclusion? So then, the right of a country that is a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations can be in the campaign of another country which is also a member of the UN. that this would be enough, it would suffice to let that country stay in the G20 and is there for global stability, which is an economic element, which is the objective of the G20. It has had an impact, a very negative impact on what Russia has done. A temporary suspension of the country from G20. If you look at it as a price to pay, I think that it's better to have them there so that they can make them tell you what they're thinking instead of having them at bay. You have already applied economic sanctions. Is that reason for exclusion in the G20 framework? No. I think that we should not go against the traditional aspects. I think that cost and benefit should be there by having them there. They will have to sign a declaration of the G20. Is it better or worse if they sign it? I think it's better that they sign the statements and not have them absent from the forum and not have them sign anything, and they would not commit to anything. I think, of course, that we could go on forever. I think I saw a hand raised in the back of the room. Is there another question that you would like to ask? Foreign Minister, I am a researcher and a migratory researcher. You have already told us about the situation in Latin America and the crisis in the United States. The decision of the judge of Louisiana, multiple reports from international agencies have said over 10,000 migrants or in transit and suffer extortion, murder, etc. What should be the position of Mexico in order to guarantee the situation and the safety of these people along the border? And also, sir, the new corridor of the free trade agreement wants to check the passing point, the Mexican-U.S. border. Uh, we will be hit. Well, you can't avoid being hit by people who are anti-immigrants by nature. The Republicans, for example. If this is an issue that's growing, you cannot in any way think that you can avoid the labor forces that you need in order to do the work. And here in Spain, we have to mention the work that we all have been doing regarding immigrants along the border. And our task is that those who are in our territory should let us know that they're here. Their leaders ask these people who are in our territory as immigrants, their governments have asked them not to carry any identification. They don't have identification of any sort on their uh, pockets to identify themselves. The people who are trafficking with these people have $5,000 in their bags to pay for their transportation. That's why we've asked the United States that so that we can have regulations regarding this phenomenon to see that how many people and who these people are who want to work in the United States. Mexico has a policy which I think is quite liberal in the sense that you could have a work permit card that you have asylum or that you are somehow a refugee. You have several options within the framework of the law that make it possible or maybe easier for you to get through. We are always working on the paperwork where you can have access. So I think that we can have a different kind of regulation in the United States that will allow us to have exactly pinpointed where these people are and what it is that can be done and what incentives exist so that people can do this through a regular way to do things. But now there's a black market with people where we have had terrible tragedies before. This way of proceeding is not going to stop. This is an aspect that is being like a business. So we say, okay, let's try to have sufficient people within our economy, and in so doing, our demography is going to be different. We are no longer quote unquote teenagers. We are adults now in Mexico. Mexico has become an adult, and we are amongst one of the most important countries in Latin America. What have we done? Well, we can do this, and we have seen it. People who come here who are not carrying any type of ID, people who just want to pass through Mexico to the United States, and the people who handle them say that they will not have any other type of protection, so they stay here. So let's use another system. What is new within all of this, where the states now, more than ever in the past, needs that number of people so that their economy can grow by 1% of more or more? If that, they won't be able to prevent inflation, as happened in Japan. Japan had to receive people from abroad and have them be in their territory. What we need is a platform of workers in productive ages and have an economic income. We just have an income, but we have to see all of this in order to be able to answer the questions that are involved in this. Thank you very much. We have 2 or 3 minutes more to go because I think you had to leave at 1:15, correct? If I can just make the last question, I I don't want to embarrass our UK ambassador, sir, but you mentioned in your presentation many of the agreements that are being negotiated, that you're negotiating, bilateral trade agreements. My question is, what are you looking for by way of a negotiation with the UK? What do you expect to have now that you couldn't have with the UK before exiting the European Union? I'm glad that you've mentioned this. You've mentioned negotiations with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has much to contribute with to Mexico. We have financial services currently in effect. We have some of the most important trade activities with Mexico. You're no longer part of the European Union, But there are things that we ask ourselves constantly. What can we do with the United Kingdom? Trade, economic practices, and we have many things to do with the United Kingdom in the near future. We also have investments. On the investment side, we are very concerned. We are very optimistic, and we wanted to have a very strong, much stronger relationship with the UK due to the new type of relationship that we have with them. Thank you very much, Foreign Minister. I know that you've had a very busy day, and it has been a pleasure to listen to your words and to talk to us about what Mexico thinks about the relationship with the UK. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very appreciative. Thank you.